When a judge fined Marilyn Manson $3.2 million, everyone thought it was over. But Manson's next legal move was so bold, it left the judge speechless and flipped the entire case upside down. When you hear that a judge has fined someone $3.2 million, you probably assume the case is closed. A fine like that is enough to make anyone back down, but not Marilyn Manson. You see, when the court hit Manson with that massive penalty, everyone thought he would pay quietly and walk away. But instead, he did something so unexpected, so strategic, that it left even the judge struggling to keep up. This wasn't just another celebrity scandal. This was a legal chess match, and Marilyn Manson wasn't playing defense. He was going on the attack. But here's the real question. How did we get here? It all started with a high-profile lawsuit that turned into headline gold for the media. The plaintiff, a former associate, accused Manson of emotional distress, breach of contract, and public defamation. These weren't petty claims. They were serious enough to land Manson in the courtroom and, ultimately, lead to a multi-million-dollar penalty. And for most people, that would be the end of the story. Pay the fine, issue a carefully crafted statement, and let the whole thing fade away. But Marilyn Manson, he had other plans. What happened next wasn't just a rejection of the fine, it was a carefully calculated legal counterattack that nobody saw coming. And trust me, the moves Manson's legal team pulled off weren't just bold. They were brilliant. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly did Manson do that had the judge rethinking everything? How did he turn a crushing fine into a potential legal victory? And more importantly, why didn't anyone see this coming? Well, to understand the legal bombshell Manson dropped, you need to know just how personal this case became. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about reputation, control, and fighting back against what Manson believed was a coordinated attack to destroy his name. From the outside, it looked like an open and shut case. But beneath the surface, Manson's legal team was laying the groundwork for a stunning reversal. One that would not only challenge the $3.2 million fine, but also turn the tables on the person suing him. And here's the kicker. He didn't stop at defending himself. Manson wanted payback, and if his legal strategy worked, the plaintiff wouldn't just lose the case. They could end up paying Manson instead. That's right. The man who was supposed to be paying millions could end up collecting millions. And the best part? Manson's strategy was completely legal. His approach was so meticulous and well-timed that even the judge, who initially seemed certain in issuing the fine, was forced to reconsider. But before we break down how Manson flipped the case, you need to know how it all started. Because without understanding the root of the conflict, you can't fully grasp how Manson turned the tables in the most dramatic way possible. And trust me, when you hear what he did next, you'll never look at celebrity legal battles the same way again. So, what exactly did Manson's legal team do that left the courtroom in shock? Let's break it down. So how did Marilyn Manson end up facing a $3.2 million fine in the first place? At first glance, it seemed like a typical celebrity lawsuit, a high-profile figure facing serious allegations. But beneath the headlines was a legal battle filled with twists, hidden motives, and one move that would eventually turn the case on its head. It all started when a former associate filed a civil lawsuit against Manson. The accusations? They were serious. Claims of emotional distress, breach of contract, and reputation damage. According to the plaintiff, Manson's actions caused irreversible harm, and they wanted him to pay. And pay he did, or so everyone thought. When the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiff and hit Manson with a $3.2 million fine, the media wasted no time. Marilyn Manson finally faces justice, screamed the headlines. The world assumed it was over. Manson had lost, and the plaintiff had won. Simple, right? Well, not exactly, because while the public saw a defeated celebrity, Manson's legal team was already working on a counterattack, and it was about to change everything. Here's the thing. Manson wasn't just fighting the fine. He believed this case was bigger than one courtroom ruling. To him, the lawsuit wasn't just about justice. It was a targeted attack on his entire career. And if you know anything about Marilyn Manson, you know this. He doesn't go down without a fight. His legal team took a bold step, one that most defendants wouldn't dare to take. They filed something called an anti-SLAPP motion. And if you're not familiar, anti-SLAPP laws are no joke. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. Basically, it's a legal tool designed to protect people from lawsuits meant to silence or intimidate them. If the court agrees that a lawsuit is frivolous or meant to shut someone up, the case can be dismissed, and the person filing the lawsuit can end up paying the defendant's legal fees. Let that sink in for a second. If Manson's motion succeeded, not only would the $3.2 million fine vanish, but the plaintiff could actually be forced to pay Manson's legal costs, a figure that could easily reach millions. And here's the twist. Manson's team didn't stop there. While the anti-SLAPP motion was their opening move, they also filed a motion to suppress evidence, arguing that key pieces of information being used against Manson were inaccurate, misleading, or improperly obtained. If this motion succeeded, the entire foundation of the plaintiff's case would fall apart. But Manson's most brilliant legal move, it came next. His attorneys demanded discovery, a legal process where both sides exchange evidence. But they weren't just after standard paperwork. They wanted everything, including private communications between the plaintiff and media outlets. Why? Because Manson's team suspected that this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was part of a calculated media attack designed to destroy his reputation. And guess what? They were right. What they found buried in those emails was explosive. There were conversations between the plaintiff and reporters, discussing how to shape the narrative and maximize the public fallout against Manson. In one email, the plaintiff allegedly suggested leaking selective information to make Manson appear as guilty as possible, even before the case officially began. And that wasn't even the worst part. Manson's legal team argued that the media coverage wasn't just biased. It was orchestrated. They claimed that the plaintiff had been working with journalists months before the lawsuit was filed, carefully crafting a story that would crush Manson's career. When Manson's lawyers presented these findings to the judge, the entire courtroom shifted. What had seemed like a simple open and shut case now had serious questions hanging over it. And here's where things took an even crazier turn. Manson didn't stop at defending himself. He went on the attack. He filed a counterclaim against the plaintiff, accusing them of malicious prosecution and defamation. If the court agreed that the plaintiff had weaponized the legal system to harm Manson's career, the plaintiff wouldn't just lose their case. They could owe Manson millions in damages. Imagine that. One moment, the world thought Marilyn Manson was about to pay $3.2 million. The next, he was flipping the case and demanding the plaintiff pay him instead. And just when you thought it couldn't get more intense, it did. Because the next thing Manson's legal team did left everyone, especially the judge, speechless. And trust me, what came next? No one could have predicted it. Just when everyone thought Marilyn Manson had shown all his legal tricks, he made a move so bold that it left the entire courtroom stunned, especially the judge. You see, the $3.2 million fine was meant to be the final blow. The court had ruled against him. The media celebrated, and most people thought Manson had no way out. But while the world was watching him lose, he was quietly preparing a counterattack that no one saw coming. And then he struck. At the next hearing, Manson's legal team stood up and dropped a bombshell. They claimed the entire case wasn't just weak. It was based on false claims and manipulated evidence, and they had the proof to back it up. Remember those emails and text messages they uncovered during the discovery process? The ones that suggested the plaintiff had been working with media outlets to shape the story against Manson? Well, Manson's team didn't just present those messages. They used them to destroy the plaintiff's credibility. In one of the messages, the plaintiff allegedly told a journalist to make Manson look as guilty as possible, weeks before any legal paperwork was even filed. That wasn't just unethical. It was a smoking gun. And the judge? They couldn't ignore it. Suddenly, the case wasn't about what Manson did. It was about whether the lawsuit itself was a setup. But here's where things got even wilder. Manson's team didn't stop at challenging the fine. They argued that the plaintiff's actions had damaged his career, leading to lost income, canceled contracts, and public humiliation. So instead of just asking the judge to cancel the fine, they wanted something even bigger. They wanted the plaintiff to pay Manson. Let that sink in. The man who was supposed to be paying $3.2 million was now demanding that the plaintiff, the person suing him, cover his legal costs and compensate him for the damage they caused. And thanks to anti-SLAPP laws, Manson's legal team had a real chance of making that happen. If the judge ruled in his favor, the entire case would collapse, and the plaintiff could be forced to pay millions. And there's more. Manson's lawyers requested a public evidentiary hearing, which meant all the evidence, all the witness statements, and all the behind-the-scenes moves would be revealed to the public. Why did this matter? Because up until this point, the media controlled the story. The plaintiff's accusations had dominated the headlines, painting Manson as the villain. But a public hearing would flip the narrative. It would give Manson's team a chance to show the world the truth, their version of the story. And guess what? The judge agreed. With one ruling, the courtroom battle became a public spectacle. And for the plaintiff, things were about to get very, very uncomfortable. But Manson wasn't finished. His legal team filed a malicious prosecution claim. This meant they were accusing the plaintiff of intentionally filing a false lawsuit to ruin Manson's reputation. If the judge agreed, the plaintiff wouldn't just lose. They could face serious financial penalties. At this point, the pressure on the plaintiff was immense. What had started as a case against Marilyn Manson had turned into a legal nightmare where they were now the ones on trial. And when the judge returned with a decision, no one expected what happened next. In a dramatic turn, the judge ruled that there was enough evidence to pause the $3.2 million fine immediately. Manson didn't have to pay a cent. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. The judge also granted part of Manson's anti-SLAPP motion, meaning that the court believed there was a real question about whether the plaintiff's lawsuit was filed in bad faith. Translation: the plaintiff wasn't just losing ground. They were now in danger of owing Manson a fortune. Think about how wild that is. A case that started with Marilyn Manson being fined millions had now shifted to a situation where he might walk away richer, while the people who tried to ruin him could lose everything. And just when you think it couldn't get any crazier, it did. The judge set a new hearing to determine whether the plaintiff had intentionally misused the legal system. If Manson won that hearing, the plaintiff could be ordered to pay all of Manson's legal costs and additional damages. Imagine going from owing millions to being owed millions. And here's the thing: Manson's legal team wasn't just fighting this battle inside the courtroom, they were also working behind the scenes to reshape the public narrative. Exclusive interviews, strategic press leaks, and public statements started to paint Manson as the real victim, someone who had been targeted and dragged through the mud by people who wanted to destroy him. And it worked. Slowly but surely, public opinion began to shift. Legal analysts, who once thought the case was open and shut, now questioned whether Manson was being treated fairly. Fans who had lost faith began to rally behind him. And the plaintiff? They were facing a legal and public relations disaster. At this point, one thing was clear: Manson wasn't backing down. The $3.2 million fine that was supposed to be the final word, it had become just the beginning of a much bigger fight, one that Marilyn Manson had every intention of winning. And trust me, what happened next? No one saw it coming. Just when everyone thought Marilyn Manson had shown all his legal tricks, he made a move so bold that it left the entire courtroom stunned, especially the judge. You see, the $3.2 million fine was meant to be the final blow. The court had ruled against him, the media celebrated, and most people thought Manson had no way out. But while the world was watching him lose, he was quietly preparing a counterattack that no one saw coming. And then he struck. At the next hearing, Manson's legal team stood up and dropped a bombshell. They claimed the entire case wasn't just weak, it was based on false claims and manipulated evidence. And they had the proof to back it up. Remember those emails and text messages they uncovered during the discovery process? The ones that suggested the plaintiff had been working with media outlets to shape the story against Manson? Well, Manson's team didn't just present those messages. They used them to destroy the plaintiff's credibility. In one of the messages, the plaintiff allegedly told a journalist to make Manson look as guilty as possible, weeks before any legal paperwork was even filed. That wasn't just unethical, it was a smoking gun. And the judge? They couldn't ignore it. Suddenly, the case wasn't about what Manson did. It was about whether the lawsuit itself was a setup. But here's where things got even wilder. Manson's team didn't stop at challenging the fine. They argued that the plaintiff's actions had damaged his career, leading to lost income, canceled contracts, and public humiliation. So instead of just asking the judge to cancel the fine, they wanted something even bigger. They wanted the plaintiff to pay Manson. Let that sink in. The man who was supposed to be paying $3.2 million was now demanding that the plaintiff, the person suing him, cover his legal costs and compensate him for the damage they caused. And thanks to anti-SLAPP laws, Manson's legal team had a real chance of making that happen. If the judge ruled in his favor, the entire case would collapse, and the plaintiff could be forced to pay millions. And there's more. Manson's lawyers requested a public evidentiary hearing, which meant all the evidence, all the witness statements, and all the behind-the-scenes moves would be revealed to the public. Why did this matter? Because up until this point, the media controlled the story. The plaintiff's accusations had dominated the headlines, painting Manson as the villain. But a public hearing would flip the narrative. It would give Manson's team a chance to show the world the truth, their version of the story. And guess what? The judge agreed. It was damning. Those messages showed that the plaintiff had been working behind the scenes to manipulate public perception, pushing a narrative that was carefully crafted to destroy Manson's career. Think about that. The whole case started with Manson being the accused. But by the time the dust settled, the plaintiff was the one fighting for their reputation. And the judge? They couldn't ignore what was happening. During the next hearing, Manson's attorneys didn't hold back. They laid out every piece of evidence, exposing how the plaintiff had allegedly used the lawsuit as a weapon. And the best part? They made it clear that Manson wasn't done fighting. His legal team filed a malicious prosecution claim, a legal move that could force the plaintiff to compensate Manson for the financial and emotional damage caused by the lawsuit. If successful, Manson wouldn't just walk away without paying the fine. He could walk away richer. And the judge's reaction? Absolutely shocking. Not only did the court agree to move forward with Manson's malicious prosecution claim, but they also expanded the scope of the discovery process. Translation: Manson's team was now allowed to dig even deeper, pulling records, conversations, and financial documents to prove that the lawsuit was part of a larger effort to destroy his career. At this point, the plaintiff's case was falling apart. The judge, who once seemed ready to punish Manson, was now reconsidering everything. And the media? They had no choice but to report the new narrative, the one where Marilyn Manson wasn't the villain, but the victim. And here's where things got even worse for the plaintiff. Because of the anti-SLAPP ruling, they now faced the very real possibility of having to pay Manson's legal fees, which, after months of legal battles, had reached a staggering amount. Imagine that. One moment, you're suing a rock star for millions. The next, you're the one facing financial ruin. And Manson? He wasn't backing down. His legal team made it clear they would fight this to the end. And with the judge now allowing further investigation, the plaintiff had every reason to worry. But here's the thing. Manson's strategy wasn't just about winning in the courtroom. It was about winning back his reputation. And the public hearing, that was his golden ticket. Manson's lawyers pushed for every piece of evidence to be publicly available, ensuring that his side of the story would be heard loud and clear. For the plaintiff, this was a nightmare. Every misstep, every questionable motive, and every inconsistency would now be exposed for the world to see. And for Manson, it was the ultimate power move. He wasn't just fighting for his legal freedom, he was fighting to take back control of his image. And here's the kicker, he was winning. The court's decision to pause the fine and advance his counterclaims meant one thing. Marilyn Manson had turned the legal tables, and now it was his accuser on the ropes. And if you think Manson was going to stop there, you don't know Marilyn Manson. So, what can we take away from Marilyn Manson's shocking legal battle? One thing is crystal clear. Never assume the story ends where it begins. At first, the headlines were simple. Manson fined $3.2 million, case closed. The world thought he would pay up and fade into the background, but instead, he fought back. And not just with words, but with a brilliant legal strategy that completely flipped the case. Manson didn't just want to avoid paying millions. He wanted justice. And through the anti-SLAPP motion, he did something most people never expected. He turned himself from the accused into the aggressor. Think about how bold that is. One moment, you're being fined millions of dollars. The next, you're asking the court to make your accuser pay you for damages. But here's the genius behind Manson's approach. He wasn't just fighting in the courtroom. He was fighting in the public eye. By demanding a public evidentiary hearing, Manson ensured that every piece of evidence, especially the shocking communications between the plaintiff and the media, would be exposed. Why does that matter? Because when public opinion is against you, evidence like that can change everything. And it did. The public narrative started to shift. Suddenly, people weren't so sure if Manson was the villain. Legal experts began questioning the validity of the plaintiff's claims. And fans who had written him off, they started to rally behind him again. But the most important moment? When the judge ruled to pause the $3.2 million fine. That decision wasn't just a win. It was proof that Manson's strategy was working. The judge wouldn't have paused the fine if they didn't believe something serious was going on behind the scenes. And let's be honest, this isn't just about one lawsuit. For Manson, this case became personal. It was about defending his name, his career, and sending a message. You won't destroy me without a fight. And here's the thing, he's winning. With the court allowing further discovery, Manson's legal team now has even more power to investigate every detail behind the lawsuit. And if they prove the plaintiff acted maliciously, the consequences could be devastating, not just financially, but reputationally. And for Marilyn Manson, this isn't just about money. This is about setting the record straight. Because while most celebrities try to quietly settle legal matters, Manson did the opposite. He made the case louder. He wanted the world to see every twist and turn, because in his mind, he had nothing to hide. And maybe that's the most surprising part of all. When the world expected Marilyn Manson to fold under pressure, he did something no one predicted. He pushed back harder. And if history is any guide, he's not stopping anytime soon. So here's the real question. What happens next? With a public hearing on the horizon and Manson's counterclaims in motion, the person who once sued him might soon be the one answering the toughest questions. And if Marilyn Manson's legal strategy has shown us anything so far, it's this. He plays to win, and he's not afraid to change the rules. Now here's the big question. Who really won this battle? Did Marilyn Manson just pull off one of the boldest legal moves in celebrity history, or is this case far from over? With the $3.2 million fine on hold and the plaintiff now on the defensive, one thing is clear. Manson isn't backing down. And here's where it gets even more interesting. What happens if Manson wins his counterclaims? Imagine going from being fined millions to winning millions instead. That's not just a legal victory. That's a message. But what do you think? Is Marilyn Manson a legal mastermind who outplayed the system? Or did he just find a clever way to avoid paying up? And do you believe his accusers were part of a bigger plan to destroy his career, or is there still more to the story? We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you stand. And if you want to stay ahead of every twist and turn in this case, make sure to follow along, because when the next legal bombshell drops, you'll want to be the first to know. This isn't just a courtroom fight, it's a battle for truth, reputation, and power. And if Marilyn Manson has shown us one thing, it's this. He's not just playing the game, he's changing the rules. So, what's your take? Is this the greatest celebrity legal twist we've ever seen? Or is the real shock still to come? Let us know below, because this story, it's far from over.